proceed?
That's just the one.
We will now proceed to the non-action item 6C, if the clerk would read.
C is overview of the Topeka Fire Department Advanced Life Support ALS implementation plan for year 2020.
Mr. City Manager.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Tonight, we're going to have a presentation regarding our Advanced Life Support program. Based on some of the discussions that occurred during the budget process and also during union negotiations, felt very important that we have Deputy Chief Richard Siegel come forward and present on our plan regarding our pilot ALS program. So, Richard?
Good evening, governing body, manager, city staff. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Richard Siegel. I have the privilege and honor of serving as the EMS chief for the city of Topeka Fire Department. Been in that role for about now 3 years, which kind of leads into this presentation. So a little bit of the history of the department that I wanted to touch on is that being an EMS is not really new to the fire department. Through a series of events of some history, we can now track it back to as early as 1913 that we were actually responding to medical calls in Perry, Kansas from Topeka. And so that's what you see, one of the devices that literally, if you think of it as a bicycle pump, it was before resuscitation was even understood. And so you kind of see the timeline there. 1975, we know there were paramedics on the department, but we don't truly understand how they're being utilized. We know they're in a medical role, but the history was limited, so we haven't been able to tease that out. But the primary thing and the takeaway from this slide is in 1983 is when we began our services of operation, as you guys have seen and known today. So we've been in this role of utilizing the EMTs at that time is when it started there. In 1999, 2001 is when we hired most of our current day paramedics. I was in that group, so I've had that privilege of being a paramedic on the department for 18 years. So I'm kind of speaking to some of this from that firsthand knowledge and can speak to it fairly well. And then in 2011 is when our last non-EMT retired. We're researching that and double checking that. So we've had this big picture of where we've come from. One of the exciting things is with your guys' vote and approval of that contract tonight, this enables this next step of history. So I'm going to chart that and put this on our date of history as well. So a little things I want to talk about, just understanding when we talk basic life support and when we talk advanced life support. So basic life support focuses around the EMT level of care. That's been our primary level of care that we can make available to the citizens. You see some of the examples of the education required for it there. So about 12 hours of education, about a semester in one of the programs, and basic skills. So if you kind of take first aid and up those skills there, that's what the knowledge and the levels that the EMTs bring with it. So that's where they function. The advanced life support, as we're talking about tonight, is the primary part there, and so this is dealing with paramedics. So in Kansas, in order to become a paramedic, you have to go through an accredited program, you have to graduate from a college, and in order to obtain that degree now. And so you see the skills assessment there, they're everything that an EMT can do, but now you add in advanced airway, the IVIO access, multiple medications. I do licensing through some other services there, and they kind of go, do you have your CPR card? And I'm like, I'm qualified to give Schedule II narcotics. So the level of medications that the paramedics can bring to the system are vastly greater than that of the EMTs. EKG interpretation and also some advanced trauma care. So one of the questions that was asked was, well, what investments have we been making along these lines? Again, I've been in this role for about 3 years there. So one of the things is that about a year ago, working with HR, we've started working towards this recruiting paramedic preference. We know it's going to take more paramedics over time to scale this in. So we've been doing that for the last year in the hiring process. Advancing that basic life support or BLS to those full capabilities. We're about 2-3 skill sets out. A lot of that was limited by some transitions in the protocols, but now we're able to move into that. Training equipment, we have the advanced life support mannequin so that those paramedics can actually practice all those skills. One of the big things in the public realm is, well, are their skills going to degrade over time? And it's proven the more you train on it, the more those skills are retained. One of the greatest advantages, that's my preference, just because I like studying the data, is the electronic patient care report now. And you'll see here in the next slides there that we can actually produce, well, what are we doing? What is the impact? What are we learning that we haven't had that ability to do that before? Our inventory tracking system has come online, so this will let us track our drugs expiring. We don't have to guess. We'll already know when they're entered into the system. And then there on the screen is a picture of our 12-lead EKG monitors. We got these in just about a month ago. We're getting ready to roll those out here over the next month and start doing the in-service training leading up to that 2020 timeline. So some of the costs associated with this is actually minimal when you look at it. And obviously we're in a tight budget year and everybody's aware of that. But the equipment to put one company in service is about $38,000, with almost all that being tied up into that monitor. The drug box and the ancillary supplies is a little over $800, so it takes about $38,000 to put a company on. That's not every single time and every single year, because those monitors have anywhere from a 5 to 15-year lifespan on it. The current ones we have are well over 10 that we should be able to get out of them. So you can see what's included in that one. As outlined there in the contract as to what you guys approved there is in 2020, it's going to be a total of $3,500 per paramedic that opts into the system there. And then 2021, it's $3,000 per paramedic. Our budget currently for 2019 is the $322,000. That's encompassing of the EMS division. As I always say, I always tell my chief I'm the happiest division there is because I'm the only person there. But it's encompassing of 80% of our call volumes. Those are all our supplies, training, additional things of trying to fund this, and a big chunk of that, again, are those monitors. So our implementation plan is outlined here in 2019 here, starting in June, July timeframe there. We'll have the firefighter informational meetings. What that entails is bringing all those who are interested in coming into the paramedic service that have that qualification, come in and give them a chance, ask so they truly understand what they're buying into. As I outlined earlier, some of these paramedics, it's been several years since they've maybe fully practiced. We have some that are currently practicing in part-time roles, so we have a mix of education there. So we want to answer those questions and give them that full informed decision that they're making with it. At that point in time, after those meetings are concluded, we're going to do the request for the intent letters, meeting the contract requirement for that one there. And then I kind of put it in quotes as Paramedic Academy. It's more of a paramedic refresher. We're not going to train them to be paramedics. We're just going to bring them up on the current practice. If you take EMS, the word in the middle is medical. And if you guys know anything about healthcare system, it's changing fast, and EMS is part of that innovation. So we just want to bring them up to speed, ensure that they have the proper credentials, advanced life support training, everything that we have checked off to make it a good, solid rollout going into that. As part of that, then, there'll be the equipment verification. Do you know how to use this monitor correctly? Do you know how to intubate correctly? Just go back through that skill refresher set. I'm fully confident in every single medic that's on the department can do it. It's just kind of knocking the dust off of it and getting back into the groove there. And then just policy review. Pretty much all the SOGs now have been written related to this, so if there's anything else along those lines, we have it pretty well covered. What's unique with EMS is that it's tied mostly to our protocols. Well, those are current, those are up to date, and it's just informing everybody with the knowledge along that skill set. Moving into 2020, as we roll out, we'll be able to put 2 paramedic companies in service. With that, then, those locations have been determined. The 2 primary ways this was done is we took a look at call volume and we took a look at response time. And really, it hadn't been looked at, so this is where data served us well, that I spent probably about a week crunching this and looking at it from every possible way. Do we look at one particular call type, or do we just look at all our calls there? And so what we were able to do with that is I created a composite index. So if you ran 0 to 100 calls, you got a 1. If you ran 200 to 300, you got a 2. And built this out across what that looked like for each of those companies responding. took that index, and that's how we made the basis for those companies there. The big thing then, and this again software driven, is that we can do quality management in all these calls. As EMS has changed and become more modern there, it's more than just even the response time, it's what's the outcome. And now we have that ability to see that and do that a little bit better of what we're doing as we feed into the bigger picture of medicine as a whole. So the impact was trying to find that one that kind of lets you guys see what we're after and what we're trying to do here. So code red and code yellow patients. Code red are what we consider the most serious or life-threatening. Without some immediate care and ultimately getting them to the hospital along those lines there's high risk of death associated with it. When it comes to the yellows, these folks are serious. They're maybe not life-threatening, but there could be something going on that's not necessarily there, but they're headed down that path. So what you see in green, and I want to look at 2018 first, and I'll explain the difference between the other years there. That green is department-wide. They're out of the code reds and yellows added up. There were over 2,703 of these that we encountered in 2018 alone. This was based off of initial acuity, and which is a really good assessment because this is when our person got there, what was the condition of the patient based off of their medical knowledge as an EMT and or a paramedic saying that this person was sick or potentially sick. So with that then, what you see in blue there is those were the actual times that we had a paramedic on scene. So the takeaway from this, we could have served 618 citizens with ALS if those paramedics had that equipment. So we weren't able to do that. So it's a fairly large impact. Nationally, when you look at this, about 20% of advanced life support calls fill in the system. When we crunch these numbers here and put it together, it lined up almost spot on. 2018, it broke down to about 22%. 2017 was about 17%. And 2019 breaks off a year-to-date ending with May the 1st is when those numbers run. The reason the numbers in 2017 are lower is we brought on our patient reporting software, and that started in March of that year. So we're missing a quarter's worth of data is why that throws that off. And then as this gets better, we're getting it tied into. So substantial impact as to the amount of citizens that we can be serving there. Some additional benefits with this, it does make us a safer, more secure Topeka. That should sound familiar because it's one of our overarching goals as we use data and looking into this, in particular the fire service there. It has the possibility of improving firefighter safety. And where this comes into play is that we can go places, and it's no offense to my colleague back there, John, their people can't go into some of those immediately dangerous life atmospheres, clap situations, different things there. We can get into those, and then while having ALS on scene, that allows us, if one of our firefighters were hurt and or citizens, we have that ability to provide ALS right then and there. We usually get an ambulance in those situations, but they can't guarantee us an ambulance based off of certain circumstances. In terms of community health, the data is one of the neat things there. Went to the presentation that Shawnee County Health had put on, networked with one of the people there, said, well, I can tell you how many people over the age of 40 have a systolic blood pressure that we interacted with. So we can share that data with some of our community partners. We were just in a meeting yesterday working with some of the things related to the presentation that you saw Officer Clam speak about with the community outreach. That ties into that community paramedicine. So we're collaborating using what we know and can actually have some impacts along those lines. Some additional things related to that are the referral programs that I've been exploring. We can't meet every single need. In other words, if there's a home health need, that's not our job. If this person's just constantly falling, there's a better way of solving the problem. And so maybe there's some advantages that we can look into with these referral programs and get some of the services for our aging community. There is potential revenue, and I go into this one cautiously, but it is in play as the EMS reimbursement models continually to change. And so this summer, CMS, the Centers for Medicaid, are actually rolling out their first pilot program nationwide to open up some of this there, and fire and EMS have a chance to play in that. And so that's what we're kind of exploring to see what we can have along those lines, plus additional revenues that might be available to along those lines. And then the big thing is probably employee satisfaction. Again, we've had these paramedics on the job for 18 years, and we're like, go out and do BLS. yet they're trained as a paramedic. That puts them in an incredibly frustrating position. And I can go into specific calls where I've been there, I'm like, I would like to do more, but I can't. And so this is something I think will make a big difference in that situation. So putting this all together, there is a plan, we have it, it's being developed, or as you saw here, and then we just got to fine tune it at this point. It's just little tweaks and adaptations with it, and I think that's where we can make a big impact. There are additional benefits and opportunities on the horizon. As I said, EMS is constantly changing, and I think we're going to be, this moves us back up to that leading where we should be. And then lastly, we can do it on budget. If I could wave a magic wand and ask for some more money, I won't put the city manager or anybody on spot there. But if we had some additional funds, we could probably do more. But we can do it within our existing budget that we have right now. So with that, I stand for questions.
I'll ask a question. I have a couple. Can you just help me visualize this? They're firefighters and ALS if they want to be. They can do both.
Correct. So they're trained as a firefighter right now, and they hold their credential as a paramedic currently.
Okay. Now explain how that looks when they go out on a call. Do they switch the role and they're as a paramedic and then another firefighter has to take their place, or what's that look like?
Yeah, so let's just walk through a typical 911. The call comes in, we go, it's chest pain. They're already there on the scene, so they're already doing that basic life support role. So now we give them those tools and equipment. Now we're gonna hook them up to the monitor. Here's an IV, here's some nitroglycerin. We're gonna make that chest pain go away. We have that technology all gathered up now, and then we hand them off to AMR for transport.
Okay, what about a fire situation? There's a fire.
So in the fire, this is where you guys are getting a deal, and it's a 2-for-1 deal, and we talk about it as an all hazards response. So they're always a firefighter at the same time. So look at his dual personalities is really the best way of looking at it, that they fill the role as needed, whatever it is. So you're getting a 2-for-1 deal in the person.
But they do the fire first, and I don't understand if there's only one of them, they do both jobs, and there's a fire here and a person here. I don't understand how's that going to work?
So here would be an example on that one. So house fire situation, they go in, they make a rescue. They can bring that person out. That's our job to provide that EMS care. And then while at the same time, the rest of the other crews are taking care of the remaining part of the fire.
So that happens now, they just can give
Correct.
further treatment. Okay.
This enables the treatment there. Again, firsthand experience. I can remember we pulled the person out of the apartment along those lines and ended up intubating them out in the field there along those lines.
And you said employee satisfaction, and you sound real excited about this.
This is a capstone for me. This is monstrous. If I do one thing in my career, it's walk away from the podium tonight excited and looking forward to January 1.
Okay, so does everybody in the department share your enthusiasm?
No, I would say no. And the deal is that this is my heartbeat. This is what I love. But the men and women of the fire department know that EMS is part of what we are. It's 80% of our call volume. There's no secret of that one. The paramedics I work with on our EMS committee and some of the other ones there, they want to provide this skill. And the fact that they haven't been able to do it in that formal format, this is huge and monstrous. And I think it's going to maybe potentially help us in that recruiting, because we've heard that from some of the recruits and just off sidebar conversations of people kind of going, well, I'm a paramedic, but I can't do anything there. So now we can say, yeah, actually you can.
Okay, any questions? Councilmember Emerson.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Kind of springboard off what she was asking there. There's been times in the past, I'm sure this has changed now, but there's been times in the past when, management might have a great idea and they kind of force it on the people underneath them and maybe haven't got their buy-in. Have you had extensive conversations? I mean, is everybody on board with this in the fire department? Are you integrating your frontline firefighters and stuff in these discussions? And
yeah, the conversations, and since I've been in my role, my conversations have been trying to lead that, and there's been pushback because it's different, it's new. I think one of the key things to say to that is what one of the wise firefighters said back in 1983. Hey, we haven't done this before. This is new for everybody. Let's get into this. Well, I'm working with the EMS committee. I haven't heard anybody say, no, it's where most of the negativity came. We've heard this for 18 years, it's never going to happen. That's where most of the negativity surrounded there. There's been some questions about the ins and outs. I think some of that came out of the negotiation process. But I think we're ready to step up to that, and I think you're going to see some really good things come out of it as we go along. So I don't know if that answers your question well.
Thank you.
Councilman Emerson.
No,
Sorry, Lesser.
That's Leslie.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Couple questions.
Yeah, do number 9.
10-4. What does the data show in regards to the calls that you guys arrive prior to EMS arriving? What does the data show in that?
Right, so that point is one I'm working on trying to gather, because collecting that one particular time is it's erroneous to get it, because, well, is that time where AMR actually arrived on scene versus the time that they made patient contact and were already there? It varies. We know there's one call in the system, it's well over an hour. We know that one. So I'm trying to collect that up to get a better picture of that. On our monitors, one of the things, because I was doing the setup on it today, I actually can timestamp that now, so we'll know exactly when that is and we can get a better picture. We're wanting to develop that. It's just there was no data point to track it, and so as we keep edging into this, we've been trying to work into that.
I think that's a really important piece of data
Agreed.
from the standpoint of we're looking at a significant expenditure, which certainly could be worth it if the data shows that you guys are getting there 10 minutes before and what have you. It's a duplication and a waste of money if we're both getting there at the same time or within the same thing, and then there becomes a power struggle, who's in charge, who's not in charge, all those different things. So
No,
I think
understood.
that's very important. Under the current plan, are we looking at utilizing the same type of vehicle transfer to get there, or are we looking at utilizing a smaller type of vehicle besides an engine or what have you?
Sure. So under the current operation, they'll respond with the engine just as they would for any EMS call right now today.
Okay. Tell me what in what I'm showing is implemented in the 2019 budget of $322,000, which it looks like equipment-wise has an initial startup of $38,000 per company. Are you looking at, through that money, have those expenditures, are those including the equipment for each? Tell me what we're looking at in that budget period before of 2019.
Right, so in 2019, in the capital outlay, we outlined, I think it was around $72,000 just for the monitors. So that was one part of that there. And then still beefing up basic life support. It's the bread and butter. And we never moved away from that, because if they don't need ALS, at a minimum, they need basic life support. So all that breakdown, that's salaries, average, everything breaking into that, line items for expenditures. For the longest time prior to coming on, we'd lost our EMS closet. So if we weren't able to restock off of AMR, or we had an emergency deal, we've slowly been just replacing and just getting things on a maintenance cycle. I mean, it's similar to the roads. A medvac deteriorates over time, and we never budgeted to replace it. It was working along that avenue just to keep everything up modern date there, some of the additional training equipment. Does that answer your question?
No, it doesn't.
Okay.
There again, I'm saying it's 322 is budgeted. I'm asking what specific type items are we looking at budgeting for 322,000 in, well, as of right now, we got 6 months left.
Right, so well, that was this year's budget, so that $72,000 of that was monitors alone. You have my salary and wages, because those are tracked to that division. A big chunk of that is mainly supplies, in terms of being ready to buy those EMS supplies or the ALS supplies, just that money sitting there waiting for that expenditure along those parts there. Some education, the EMS renewal fees coming out of that when we renew their EMS certifications each year, paying for any of the specialty classes if we can't offer it for some reason, bring in an outside instructor. That's the breakdown of just those daily operational costs.
Okay, so what I'm hearing is basically stocking the program with the different physical needs that it needs for
Yes.
that, as well as your salary and so
Yep.
forth. Thank you.
I think I remember, I think it was Chief Duke that said some of these supplies are given or refilled by someone and we don't have to pay?
Correct. So what happens typically, if it works out, but I can give an example, is it'll be like a cardiac arrest. It's just busy, everybody's along those lines, and it's a busy day, we gotta get there, so maybe we weren't able to restock from AMR. Our disposable items are to be replaced by AMR, but we gotta buy that initial allotment. Or if it's something that we carry that's maybe different than AMR, we're responsible for that equipment along those lines. That's where it kind of was asked about the buy-in. In other words, maybe that IV catheter is maybe a cheaper catheter, we can have a better catheter and put that better quality equipment in their hands there. The med bags, there's just certain things that aren't always interchangeable. The suction our suction units use a different canister than what we could, so AMR can't resupply us that. So it's just building up and having that network of supplies.
So then the budget that was mentioned wouldn't be that high next time because our supplies would be,
Yeah, as we keep, we're about 3 years into it, so we're seeing what we're needing there. I think
Okay.
as you guys see the next budget there is some reduction in it.
Okay.
So that piece is in there.
Councilmember Lesser.
Thank you. Another question. The one thing that was not in here that I did not see was, what is the revenue expectation from these services? Do we have any revenue expectation for these services?
We haven't gone through and analyzed that. So potential revenue services would be if CMS would change that we can bill for certain services, there's that potential for it there. There's options of working with AMR in terms of, hey, maybe an example would be potentially like the lift assist. So there's options in trying to just explore those, put that before staff and then see what can be negotiated. Some of that can be done as an individual, some of that can't be, so we're just working within the right system.
Have we looked at legally, obviously, for instance, when a relative of mine had to be transported to the hospital and they got their bill, variety of different things, on that when we reviewed it. Have we looked at, or are we going to be looking at those type of items in regards to what different insurance companies do allow in regards to our billing practices and stuff like that?
Right, so.
You thought that makes sense?
Yeah, absolutely. So we're tracking maybe what some of those expenses are as to getting into that billing business. Those are kind of that steps, and I would really actually put that as part of a long-term strategic plan to seeing what we can actually bill for. So we're tracking the expenses related to it, but we wouldn't know what the potential revenue is just based off of reimbursement models. If they're a Medicaid patient, the reimbursement is different. If they're Medicare, so that's a wide open. Most of my focus has been making certain that we're doing what we're supposed to be doing at that basic life support, having everything prepared for that advanced life support, and then those would be the next long-term pieces as we move into this, is what can we potentially collect.
Thank you.
Councilmember Padilla.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Earlier, you said, in response to a question, that when personnel arrives, they will arrive with the engine. When a call goes out for service, is it distinguished between a fire or medical service call?
Yes.
Okay. So will the response with an engine, will that put additional stress, wear and tear, mileage on our engines out there?
It doesn't, because we already go to those calls anyway.
My point being that if it's a medical emergency rather than a fire emergency, is there some thought to respond to the medical emergency in a different type of vehicle rather than the engine?
Right, so with that question there, it's very complex. That's the first thing I'll get, but I'll answer it as best as I can along those lines.
Thank you.
We have not had those direct conversations. just some things to think about is stations. In order to have an additional vehicle that you would have to fit into that, how that model would be staffed. Part of the reason that we've operated, and it would be part of a long-term strategic plan, so that's kind of what we're working and developing there to see if that's even feasible. So to answer it though is, right now by responding with that engine, there are those times where we've had to break into the house, for lack of better words there, so we need those tools to do that. I've been on calls where we've had to ladder the window in order to get to those lines there. We've had some of these that maybe occasionally come in that we just need those tools. That engine or that truck company is our toolbox in order to work through some of those situations there. If it's a rescue situation, we need like the Stokes basket would be an example that comes off of a truck company. There's lots of variables into it, and then you'd have to get into distinguishing, is that just a straight medical, or would that be like a car wreck situation? So in a car wreck, we need the extrication tools plus the additional, that engine is there for that fire protection purposes as well as the medical. So it's a big issue that's worth vetting and looking into to see if that's feasible. For us right now in our operational model, that's not designed to change right now. It could be part of that long-term strategic conversation.
Well, you bring up some good points, and I would encourage you to, dig into it and have a lot of conversation about that. But I like your explanation. Thank you.
Councilmember Jensen?
Currently, who makes the determination whether somebody needs to be life flighted? And if you guys don't, will this give you the capability to do that, shortening that already critical time?
Sure. So within the city limits, we would normally almost never put somebody on a helicopter, that there's just no rationale, because at any given point in the city limits, you're probably about 10 to 15 minute transport time. So the helicopter argument wouldn't change any of that. Where the helicopters come into play, they might be pre-staged at the hospitals, and if they need to move people out there, that's more into a mass casualty situation that we'd potentially need all modes of transportation, certain burn patients, but those would generally fly out of the hospitals because just setting those helicopters down is a challenge. So it doesn't fit right into our model. I've been on a few of those scenes, but they're few and far between that we've ever landed a helicopter in the city limits.
So right now, somebody has to go to a hospital and wait to be seen there before they're transferred to like KU Med, for example?
Right, so Stormont would be an example that they're level 2 trauma center, so they might be prepared for transport there, the helicopter would be there, and then fly them down along those lines.
Okay, it just seems like that's an absorbent amount of time for someone's life to be waiting for a helicopter decision to get made at a hospital.
Yeah, one of the issues with the helicopter service though is just even calling them. They're either coming right now out of Lawrence or Junction City, so you have just that flight time of even the request there. Before they're even here, that person would be delivered to the hospital.
Well, but that's what I'm asking though, is if you guys can make that determination and get them airborne and on the way, as opposed to waiting until you get to the hospital and letting somebody else make the call and then waiting for them to, it take some time to spin up that gear and get it airborne.
Sure, yeah, and so for us, that would not typically be our role. When we look at all our call volume and everything else there, our goal is to get them to that hospital first for additional care that we can't do. So for like us in the cardiac arrest situation, hey, we get their heart started, we get this going, we stabilize them, get them to the hospital, and then the hospital can decide, can they take care of them, and then they need to fly to further tertiary care.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Hiller?
Well, I appreciate getting this analysis as well as your enthusiasm.
Thank you.
But as I've said before, we need master planning, and when we're talking about something that's a major change in services or dollars, that's something that really needs to be approved by the council before it goes forward. I'll just say that and then set it aside. Question on your cost page then, because this is kind of incremental, but where are we going with this? You talk about $38,000 a company. So how many companies do we have, and how many would be fully outfitted?
Right, so right now that 38,000, so take that times 2, we're doing 2 companies starting in 2020 is where we're starting. After that point in time, it would be our goal to eventually add to that. In other words, where those 2 companies are located, those citizens in that area are the ones who are going to get the maximum benefit from it, but it's based off the call volume, things along those lines. Our goal would be to spread that out ideally as we look at and continue to gather additional data.
Okay, So your goal is not to eventually go citywide and have that service available in the entire city?
No, I believe Chief Duca spoke to that's one of our long-term goals. If we can't budget, we can't budget and do it. So it's going to be based off of the parameters that you guys establish along those lines. It has to be within the budget constraints.
Well, I understand that every year, but we need to know what this would look like fully implemented. At least I would like to know.
Sure.
And so how many companies do we have?
So you'd have a total of 18 companies.
Okay. So we need 18 times 38,000, at
That's,
least
and
$58.
actually, it'd be 16 now because we'd have 2 outfitted currently. So it'd be 16.
Okay, but nonetheless, taxpayer dollars, we're talking 38,000 times 18.
608.
Just to get 600.
608.
Thank you. And then over here on the personnel, how many people out of the fire department, how many firefighters, in terms of where you're going with this, would either have the option to be or would have to be fully certified paramedics?
Sure. So if we went 24/7, 365, every single company, out of those companies there, it'd be 54 times 3.
54 times 3. So, and each of those people, when they certify, gets $1,000, and then they get an extra $3,500 a year?
No, the $1,000 is that one time only for that year 2020 per the contract.
All right, but how much extra pay does somebody get if they're a paramedic versus just an EMS qualified firefighter?
If
And I might not be using the right word, so correct me.
That's fine. So we have 12 paramedics on the department right now. So out of that there, if you use the 2020 number, that would be the maximum based off of the contract. So it's going to be subject to ongoing contracts.
I want to know where we're going with it.
Right, and so the desire, if everything aligns, would be citywide, 24/7, one paramedic on each company all the time.
So only one, not everybody. You just got to bring me along here.
No, it's a fair question. So no, it's at least one paramedic on each company would be the long-term goal.
So just one on each company. So how much backup do we have to have? And I don't want to get too far in the weeds, but if somebody's on vacation or they're sick or whatever.
Right, so
then what
those
do
would
we
be
do?
those would be the operational parts there. So if we have to hire back a paramedic that day, it'd be whatever their wage is. They're not getting any additional money outside of the overtime wage that would be available to them. And that's if we need to staff it. Those are those deep details in terms of saying, where do we want to go with that operationally? That's what we're building into that strategic long-term plan.
Well, I guess I think we need it before we go anywhere. Obviously you'd need a bench of maybe more than 54. Those kinds of things, I just wondered if you'd already worked through.
City manager?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I think one of the things we need to look at and remember is that we're talking the 2 stations to start in the year 2020. And then in 21, it's hard to know whether we would be adding a station or not. We would be evaluating how many paramedics we had on shift, how many were interested. That'll gauge that. But the important thing is through the use of the 2 companies in 2020, we would then be able to get the information, such as Councilman Lesser brought up. Are we beating AMR to the scene where it's beneficial for us to have this service continue? Evaluate the impact that we have. How many lives were we able to assist by having that higher level of service? And that's what the pilot program is to be able to tell us. Then we can then start measuring the cost and benefit of having that per life saved, per many other types of factors that can be evaluated. And from there, then we can bring a case to you as to whether this should provide that information and should we continue to expand this program. And so some of these questions that you're looking at, we can run the numbers and tell you what the cost would be, but in reality, without knowing the impacts that it has by having that service available, I can't give you a clear picture. I can run a number and tell you how much it would cost to staff, how much it would cost to fill, but it really, until we determine through the pilot program that it's a worthwhile program for us, based on the impacts of saving lives and et cetera for the department, I think you were going to that step. We've got to run the pilot program and see where we end up, and then determine whether that is beneficial for the community based on the cost that it has.
I guess if I can respond, to me, it's a huge expense, it's a huge change in service, and there are plenty of other communities that have done that, and I know that Mr. Siegel has researched some of that, and people have along the way. I mean, to even start down this aisle, unless we have an idea where we'd be going if we fully implemented it and what that would look like, it's hard. I mean, already it got put in the budget a couple of years ago just to test something. I guess that hasn't happened yet, or not much, but, you know, we got told, oh no, you've committed, and we hadn't. And to even start, unless we know where we're going with it, to me, that's responsible planning, it's responsible management, and I wanted an idea, you know, again, with the CMS, besides the personnel and this startup, we got a little bit of information on this annual budget. We were told, I don't know, this has been considered on and off, that it would be like $1 million. Maybe that has to do with changing out what equipment you're using, how you implement this. Again, I know you've done a lot of research. We have places we can look. I don't think we have to do it ourselves to figure out some of those things. So, also had a question, if I may, and this is not new. It's come up before when we were talking about hiring and diversity, where you think now if it's only part of the personnel, so that's 54 is 1/4 of the firefighting
It'd be one
force?
shift, yeah.
One out of every 4 people would have to be a paramedic.
Right now, yeah, so it'd be a total of, let me think through here. You'd only need 18 on a shift then, would actually be the number along those lines there. I misspoke on that part there, not understanding that one. So you'd only need 18. You need to have 1 paramedic on each company at that time. So I misspoke on that, I apologize.
No, I think you're all right. So 18 times 3 is the
Yes.
54.
Yeah.
Round the clock.
Yeah.
That's okay. Just trying to figure out how many people would have to meet that higher standard. We've been really working on diversifying the hiring, and to add that level of college degree and so on. What's your assessment of how that could affect our initiative on diversifying the workforce?
Obviously, we're going to have to see there. We have that preference there. We do know, just looking at the paramedic pools, when I'm watching the classes there and stuff, it might open that up into diversifying that. There may be more women that would go into paramedic that had maybe not thought about the fire service, so that maybe opens that up for us along those lines. So there's potential. We're just going to have to watch and see what the long term is, if it has that impact or not. The primary impact is that we've had paramedics say, I won't go there because you won't let me do my skill set. Now, because they can do their skill set, it has that potential and opens us up against some of the comparative services out there.
If I can ask one more.
Okay.
You said that, at least for starters, what you're talking about is just adding this to the existing equipment, existing fire station size, and so on. In your research and your visioning for this, in a perfect world, what would the setup be?
Oh, wow. Don't give me a blank slate. EMS is incredibly challenging right now. And because of the amount of change that's going on, that's been my job when I've gone to these conferences and networking with some of these national leaders who are figuring out where are we going with this. What EMS looks like now in 2 years could actually be incredibly different, and we need to adapt the model. So we might find out we need to do this that way different there. For me to paint that pie in the sky there, yeah, I would love to have a paramedic on every company available 24/7. That would be my dream world. But we got to work within, as we talked about, those budget constraints. Is it necessary? And I think the city manager alluded to that. Let's go collect that data and know that impact. And fortunately, we have the software to do that now. What type of impact are we making? So I can't give you that ideal outside of, that would be my initial goals, and expanding anything further than that would be speculative and foolish on my part.
You might have misunderstood me, and so sorry about that. You had a question earlier about use of the fire engines versus other vehicles, and obviously, just adding some equipment to the existing apparatus that we have is easier than changing out your whole structure
Sure.
of your system. But in a fully actualized system, would you still just have that staff structure the way you're talking about it and use the existing fire engines rather than a totally different structure?
Yeah, right now, that's all we have in front of us, and so that's what we have to use right now.
I understand that,
Yeah.
but you've been studying a lot, and I just wondered if there was a model that, in a perfect world,
There are multiple models. What I would genuinely say is, we got to find the model that best fits Topeka. Is there potential other models? The answer is yes. We haven't vetted those entirely as a staff, letting chief and city manager discuss what some of those goals, what those priorities look like. We haven't gone that deep with that. My whole goal during this time has been getting us set up to where we can function right now. That's been all my focus over these last few years, writing the policies, the procedures. Am I looking at those? Do I keep those in my toolbox? The answer is yes. But if I sit there and say, hey, we can do it in golf carts and we match it, there's no way of going there right now with it and giving it fair shake without having that true look at what fits those needs and mainly our service model, because as our citizenry changes, as they're getting older, maybe there's a better way of doing some of that. So it's constantly looking at it. That's where my excitement comes from, is because it's constantly changing. I mean, literally what has changed in the last 18 years and the way it drives us forward, it's going to be ongoing and trying to stay on top of that as best as we can.
okay, I guess emergency medical care seems pretty constant.
It seems constant, but I can most assuredly tell you, and I could bring John up here, we've seen more changes in EMS. It's a new service. It's only actually been around since '74. It's reinventing itself as to how to plug into the medical system. We weren't seen as professionals. EMS has not been seen as professionals for a long time, and we're finally just breaking that ground, kind of going, wow, these are qualified, skilled people to deliver care in incredible environments. So it seems like it's on those parts there, but all those things, and as Councilman Lesser was asking, those are that next level of how do we fit that, because we as Topeka Fire have never taken that on. And that's what's exciting about this, is seeing where do we fit in that piece of that puzzle and explore those things and take it to that next level and what that looks like for the citizens of Topeka.
Okay, Councilmember Lester.
Thank you. Yeah, and that kind of goes back to one of the, like I said, the first questions that I asked, that kind of goes along with Mr. Councilman Padilla is, you know, we've established that starting off, we're going to be using the same vehicles, you know, and so with that then goes back to me where, with that being constant, I don't understand the expenditure of all this money up front prior to, I mean, we can do that study right now from a response time of how fast, how many times, what are the numbers and the data of us getting there before the, you know, I mean, we can do that before we spend all this money to, you know, with all, you know, all due respect, having a whole bunch of computers in the docking basement, you know, and realizing we don't need them, you know. That to me seems like, now if you were telling me, hey, we're gonna have an Explorer at these stations and we're gonna use that and we're completely changing things up, and on medical calls only, hey, we're gonna do this, boom, and how can we do that? But what I'm hearing is we're using the same vehicles, so we have the infrastructure already right now to create our own data to see that is before we go and spend a whole bunch of money to say, you know what? You know, now granted, every life is important. Don't get me wrong. We save one. If it's my family, then that's worth it, and I get that. But we get that there, and we find out that the data shows that we're only getting there 3 minutes, 2 minutes, you know, whatever. Then we have to weigh the pros and the cons. That's kind of what I'm saying. So I'm not disagreeing with you. No, I want to know what the data says, but I don't know about spending a whole bunch of money up front when we have what we can do to determine what it is already. Just as we go.
Understood.
Thank you.
Councilmember Jensen.
Thank you, Your Honor. So, Mr. City Manager, I would ask you to get the City Forest staff to pull the video from the Budget Committee meeting where we discussed this and send it out to the council, because especially for the new folks, we're rehashing a lot of the conversations that I recall us having there when we initially approved the pilot, in that we needed information so that we could decide if this was the right move for Topeka in general. And we had talked about, what do other cities do? Well, ladies and gentlemen, there's only one Topeka, Kansas. There's only one Topeka, Kansas, with the demographics that we have, with the joint medical and fire community we have. So we can look at other communities, but that's not going to give us the detailed, specific information that apply to our Topeka, to our community, the way we do business here. We talked about, can we do run reports to see how much time is saved and whether or not that really matters when someone's dying. But until you actually know how long it takes our paramedics to pull a piece of gear off one of our fire trucks, actually get it on the patient and get it working, sometimes you can't estimate those. I mean, part of my entire job is guessing how gear we buy and install is going to work. And I can tell you a couple times that's been completely wrong, and had we not tested it before we fielded it, it would have been bad. So the reason to do a pilot program is to make sure that this works. These are people's lives. This isn't, we don't get a second chance at this. This has to be right every single time. So, yes, there is good information out there, looking at how other communities have done this, that have gone before us, and trying to look at run report estimates and that sort of thing. I don't want to think, I want to know when it comes to people's lives. The reason I voted to do this pilot program back then was because, again, it's people's lives. It's not their property, it's their life. You only get it, you get one chance to get it right, and I commend you for putting as much effort and time as you have into getting it right, because we can't fool around with this. Of all the things we do in the city of Topeka, public safety is the thing we have to get right. And this is a critical aspect of that, just critical.
Yeah, and I have full confidence in that, because we can answer some of those questions. I can see from the time we went on scene to patient contact, and that's why that quality management on those calls there, and I have full confidence that we will see some impact. What that looks like, that's the next step. Part of that budgeting and that sequence was kind of leading up to this. Negotiations began. There were some of those dynamics that were out of our control, or out of my control, I should say. And so that's where we've been very frugal with those money, and that I can assure you that those dollars are accounted for. They're not wasted along those parts there, that I don't buy what's not necessary. And that I can assure the public there, and especially when it's other people's money, I probably can get tighter with it. So no, I'm quite aware of what you're saying. I appreciate the feedback, and agree again with Councilman Lesser as well, and understand that's what my role has been, trying to get into this and tease it apart and do it well and do it right, and that's my intention, and I think it's the department's and the members' intention as well.
And I very much want you to come back to us and say that money you spent saved X number of lives. Had we not had the ability to get in there and do the advanced life support, we would have lost them. Everybody on this council should be frugal with money, but at the end of the day, if we're out there and we're saving lives because of money we spent, then that's our most important job up here. Thank you.
Okay, that concludes.
Madam Mayor?
Yes.
If I can just follow up with what Councilman Lesser said, we already have the data on all those calls, on when we arrived, whether we lost lives. My understanding is we have the data on the gap between whether AMR got there ahead of us or whether they got there after us, correct?
That one we don't have fully.
But I mean, it's not
tracked.
anything that would be new because we've inaugurated this program. If we want to keep track of it, we can. I mean, the data on the calls is, we can add to it, of course, but I wanted to ask the city manager, similar to the report on claims, we used to get the annual report on the calls with the chart. There's an annual data report that you all get that shows how many calls per station, and of those, how many were fire calls and how many were EMS calls, right? And I asked the city manager for it after the beginning of the year, and he had just gotten it and said that everybody was looking at it. So I'm sure you guys have been poring all over that, but I think that it would be good to let the council see that. I've always found it really informative if we could pass it out.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, that concludes the non-action items. Now we move on to the announcements. Thank you, Siegel.
My pleasure.
The city clerk, no. Yes. Will the city clerk read the preliminary agenda?
On May 21st, we have a presentation on the Troy Scroggins Award. Consent agenda, we have approval of acquisition of real property at 1203 and 1221 Northeast Chester Avenue. We have a noise resolution for Seaman High School. Setting a public hearing for a special assessment on Southwest 49th Street and Winger Road. We have the ordinance regarding the filing and disposition of claims. We have a resolution considering the adoption of the new city flag design. Discussions include dynamic core redevelopment TIF district, discussion on winter operations summary, and then a discussion on the Topeka Fire Department station analysis.
Okay. Mr. City Manager?
I have nothing to add. We have a busy agenda at the next meeting, so we'll try and make sure we get all of that. I think most of the information is available or has been presented, and we'll do the best we can to get through the items.
Okay, announcements. We had the Rosebud Park, what's it called, groundbreaking. I kept thinking shovel. Groundbreaking this morning, and they think that's going to be done by the end of the year. So that's fun to get over to Noto and see that. And also, along with Mr. Padilla, I saw him there, I went to Save the City at French Middle School. And these 8th graders come up with an idea that could help the city, and they present that. And Dr. Peak, are you here? Potholes was the #1 thing they can fix. So I am going to send you their information, and they have some pretty good ideas that the other countries are actually doing. And then there was a lot of fuel burning trash for fuel. There was a lot of people that talked about the homeless and what to do with houses that were condemned. So Ms. Sasha, I'm going to send you their names. And then the most, I think we do need to do something about this, and I bet Councilmember Ortiz agrees with me, that there's nothing for kids from age 13 to 17 to do in the city.
Oh, say that again?
Yep, there was a bunch of them that had all these planned hangouts and what to do at Kmart and White Lakes, and I thought, they've got a point. They've got a point. So, gosh, I was impressed. That was a pretty good deal. All right, announcements, Ms. Ortiz?
Thank you. I'm glad you announced that. We say time and time again, there's nothing for our young people to do, and they say, oh, yes, they are. There's this and that, but in reality, there's not. So hopefully we can put our minds together and work on that and get sponsored by Emerson Construction. The Metro Kids Ride Free is from May the 15th through August the 15th. And so that'll get the kids to the jobs. We just got to create the jobs to get them to. But don't forget that May the 15th to August 15th. Metro has done a great year. I think they said they started this in 2013. I would like to thank Chief Cochran, Lalo Munoz from El Centro, the city manager, Lisa down there, the city attorney, and Mr. Padilla for supporting the Coffee with the Cop. Chief Coffee with the Chief or Coffee with whoever, but it was a success. I talked to the chief about it, and we had a lot of steady traffic in and out, and that was awesome. And the most awesome thing was that people supported the business. They bought tacos or something to eat, and I think that was very, very neat, unique too. I had to chuckle because the owner came and said that they received like a few calls and wanted to know what was going on. Was the business establishment being raided? So we were recognized. And she said and she had to tell them no, and to come on down and speak with the officers and our police chief. And I think that speaks volumes because you know, when you look at these establishments, and I talked to the chief, I said, that's not gonna be the first, and it's not gonna be the last. You know, it's one thing to get to somebody's house, you know, but and once you get there, you know, I mean, they welcomed us in, and once we get there, we've got to perform and make sure that we're listening and being on our best behavior. I had a lady that, she sat there all night and she watched me, and then probably 20 minutes before it was over, she came up and she said, I need to speak to one of these officers, but I'm scared too. So I picked one of our policing officers out, and he was able to break down some barriers with her. And that's what it's all about, to get the neighbors to talking and thus forth. I seen Lisa over there in a little table trying to eat her little tacos, and I was shocked. She brought her husband, but you know, Matt Pavardikin came through, and I mean that's what it's about. It's what it's really about. Padilla was on the post for the door. He never left the door post, you know, but that's okay. We've got to have him somewhere. So I just want to say thank you, and also. Just be mindful that our kids are getting ready to get out of school. And we're going to have a lot of kids home all day by themselves. There's a lot of free food sites, and we need to guide them to that. So, thank you.
Councilmember Emerson.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Got a few things. First of all, next Monday night at the American Legion at 38th and Michigan, District 4 is hosting the Strengthening Police and Community Partnerships, the SPCP, thing that they're doing in all the other districts. It's going to be next Monday, May 20th at 6:30 p.m. So if you live in another district and haven't been able to get to one of the others, please come, and I hope everyone in District 4 will come out for that. I've heard great things from Districts 1 through 3 so far on that. Secondly, kind of echo what Councilwoman Ortiz said. This weekend is graduation. I know at least Highland Park High School, I think all of 501 on Saturday. And then at least the other school in my district, Shawnee Heights, is graduate Sunday. So going to be a lot of kids out. There'll be a lot of kids doing unwise things. So someone once told me good advice, it's be smart while you're being dumb. So don't do anything this weekend celebrating. It's going to ruin the rest of your life. Lastly, and I've heard they're watching because my daughter sent me a text that says, please, more discussion on ALS. But I asked my daughter, I want to congratulate my daughter Katie, who just finished last night her last final out at the Air Force Academy. And a couple minutes later, there's a tradition after your last final, your senior year, you jump into what's called the Air Gardens, this fountain with all your uniform on and stuff. Only seniors can do that. But right before she did that, her boyfriend, Will Duvall, proposed to her. So congratulations, Katie and Will, and all the cadets in Wolfpack Squadron 19. Thanks.
Cool. Councilmember Padilla.
I don't think I can top that. I want to follow up on Councilwoman Ortiz's comment. I did leave the door, and I have witnesses because I was serving food to the city manager and his wife. So it was a good event. I saw Lisa there and visited with her as well. It was a good turnout. And like the deputy mayor said today, I went to that Save Our City event. This is the second year I've gone there. Last year, Councilmember Mays was there as well. They had some great ideas, and following up about what you said, those kids gave me their business cards, and I've already given them to Dr. Peak. Oh, did you? So that he can contact them about some of their ideas. But what impressed me about most of those things, I think maybe you'll make the same observation, is most of the ideas those kids had were to help others. Mm-hmm. It really was. And it wasn't, well, this is a great idea, I could make a lot of money out of it, mm-hmm. make a big business. That wasn't the driving force. The driving force was, how do I help people in this community? So that's very encouraging. It also was encouraging to hear them say, I like Topeka, I want to stay in Topeka, and we've talked about that, keeping our youth here. So that was encouraging. I'm glad I had the invitation to go. And I encouraged them to get in contact with members of our city's youth commission, because I think that's a good way for them to follow up on some of their ideas. And I really want to give a thanks to the city manager and the staff of the neighborhood relations. They really jumped in and helped me put on an event at Highcrest to encourage the residents there to come and join the NIA and get involved more with the things that they're trying to do in that area. And it was, I think by all accounts, a good event. Emerson was doing his impression of a airline hostess, walking down the aisles, pushing a little cart with all the things that go on, pancakes and so forth. And I want to thank Councilwoman Ortiz for being there as well. But it was well attended. I got a lot of good feedback, and those are the kinds of things I think really make it important for us, like we've all said, to communicate with the people we serve, regardless of what district it is or anything like that. So thank you, Monique and her staff. They were outstanding. They took over, really. I mean, that woman is a little whirlwind, and so my gratitude to them. Thank you.
Councilmember Jensen.
So I would dispute what the deputy mayor and Ms. Ortiz have said about things to do in this town for teenagers. The library, Parks and Rec, the Boys and Girls Club, the zoo, I think those folks would dispute that, just to name a few off the top of my head. I want to congratulate all the folks that helped put on the concert downtown this past weekend. Despite the threat of rain, it seemed to go very well. We came downtown to bring Hunter to his first downtown concert and check it out. It was very nice. I want to send a special congratulations out to Danielle Beckley, my sister-in-law. There are now 2 Beckley gals that are smarter than me, and that scares me. I'm running out of negotiating room here. But congratulations, Danielle. She's graduating from college, and I can't remember when she did her last final, but she's super excited, and we're headed up to Des Moines this weekend to see her walk across the stage. So have a great week, everybody.
Councilmember Mays.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. The Save Our City thing, I wasn't able to make it this year, but I did go last year, and I had a blast. I thought it was really fun, and so hopefully everybody can make that out, make it out to that next year. Wanted to also remind everybody the St. Jude Dream Home tickets, there's less than a month left before they do the drawing, and tickets are limited, so buy one if you haven't yet. Thank you.
Councilmember Cohen.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I wanted to share with you guys, I was invited to a Facebook group this week called Topeka Positive Reviews. And if you guys haven't been invited to that, definitely seek it out. It's actually quite nice to scroll through and not see people complaining about Topeka all the time. It's really nice. It's talks about, you know, good experiences they've had with local businesses and things like that. So Topeka Positive Reviews. So be sure to check that out. Thanks.
Great. Councilmember Lesser.
Wanted to first say a thank you to Chief Cochran and Fire Chief Duke for their Sonny and Cher. I don't know if I'll ever be the same again after seeing that, but great cause for CASA last week, and they were really good sports. And then I want to say congratulations to my son, Big D, Dylan, graduates on this weekend, and just off, you know, he never knew his mom and dad, you know, so he did that back and forth deal, and just a great kid with a big heart and a hard worker, and I'm just so darn proud of him that I know he's watching in Wichita. So congratulations, Dylan. Dad's proud of you.
Councilmember Hiller.
Oh, rolling along. In addition to young people being able to ride the bus free after the 15th, seniors ride free all month. So anybody here that would fit either of those categories should be on the bus. And related to that, I hope everybody's seen the Brown v. Board Wrap Bus. It was inaugurated last year. It's really cool. And it has been on the street, I think on routes, but we are now in day 5 of 10 for the 65th anniversary of Brown v. Board. And that bus has been taking people on the tours and will continue to do that through Saturday. Along those lines, we did start, it's been very successful and full. Started with the plaintiff's end of hear our voices and recognition of the plaintiffs. A number of the events have already happened, but there's still a chance to get to the symposium this Friday. Real talk next steps about the agenda of Brown v. Board. Tomorrow is the debut of I Just Want to Testify, the new KTWU film that will be debuted at Brown v. Board. We will have one of the assistant general counsels from the National NAACP there, as well as the gentleman who is the head of the 400, the commission nationally for the 400th anniversary of the first slave ship arriving in the U.S. They simply have migrated. Other people are coming to town because of the events that we're having. Thursday will be film days from 10 to 9, and then Kevin Wilmot will join us afterward. Our keynoter on Friday is, all of a sudden I'm having is Reuben West, who grew up in Topeka and is now a national, internationally known motivational speaker and coach. And so he will be the keynoter Friday morning. And then there will be bus tours on Saturday at 11 and 1 and 2:30. So should fit anybody's graduation schedule to go tour some of the historic sites related to Brown v. Board. And for Councilman Emerson and people who are worried about an option for a really great grad party, we will have a celebration at the mural on Friday night, right before graduation, from 5 to 10, with food trucks and music and spoken word, and it's a multi-generational, multicultural event, so everybody should go bring the fam or friends and come on down and party on.
Great.
And I do have a new grandchild, which I finally was allowed to tell about. Miss Anna Elizabeth was born on April 29th, and she's pretty cute.
She is pretty cute. Okay, we are ready to proceed now with public comment. We have one person signed up, Henry McClure.
Council, staff, good evening. Henry McClure live. Congratulations.
Thank you.
A son's a son till he marries his wife, but a daughter's a daughter for the rest of your life. And that's the way we got to start looking at the college TIF district. It's our daughter, and you can't give up on it. It comes down to what did you know and when did you know it? Let's go back to Watergate. We found a lot of corruption back in the old days, and a lot of people didn't tell the truth. What did you know and when did you know it? I'm going to tell you now, you didn't put a provision in the Wheatfield development to record the development agreement. You need to record the development agreement to Wheatfield so the same thing that happens in College Hill doesn't happen again. What did you know and when did you know it? So, this will be interesting. I filed a complaint with the Kansas Real Estate Commission because the guy that owns the College Hill project now says I never was disclosed. He would have found out if it was recorded. Whose fault's that? We can all point the finger at me, and most people do. What did you know and when did you know it? So, he's trying to hide behind the fact that it wasn't disclosed to him, but when I was showing that real estate to prospects of mine, I alerted the real estate brokers that there was a default in the TIF district, there was a default in the development agreement. So now we'll find out, because now the real estate broker has got to hide behind the fact, well, hey, I did disclose this, because otherwise he's going to be fined. So we'll find out. The truth will come out as long as we keep working on it. What did you know and when did you know it? But you had a fiduciary responsibility to the taxpayers to not approve that BART park. You could have showed the TIF district, you could have showed the development agreement, and let me tell you something, there isn't a developer that's going to try to take that on legally. There's no way we could prove the fact that the BART park is going to be better for the community than the will of the people of the TIF district. Look, we had to get the county, 501, all the taxing authorities to approve that. There is no way you could prove in court, and also the risk reward of the cost, the legal expense you would take as the developer to try to sue the city. And there's an old saying in business, don't ever sue people that you want to do business with. So what did you know and when did you know it? Now you've been put on notice about Wheatfield, and if I have to go down and record the document, I'll go do it. But I'll make another open records request, and we'll see if it's recorded by next week. It's funny, the 3-minute thing went off. One of the firefighters back there was saying, you got 3 minutes to get the brain damage, you know, or the brain goes dead. So maybe we ought to start limiting the meetings here to 3 minutes, or the public comment. But what did you know, and when did you know it? You tell the developer, you didn't take a business approach to the guy. Hey, you want this bark part bad enough, you make up the shortfall. You pay the shortfall. $300,000 a year has got to start meaning something. You get all fired up about money all of a sudden. Where was that Karen Hiller? I needed that Karen Hiller in here that day.
Sir, you can't address individuals.
Well, I needed somebody to get fired up over $300,000. I need somebody to rise to the occasion. And don't forget the TIF district. It's our daughter. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, there is a need for an executive session. Do I say one or two now? Two. There's a need for 2 executive sessions this evening. Would the city attorney please read the notice?
Motion is to recess into executive session for a period of time not to exceed 15 minutes to discuss the acquisition of real property necessary for utility infrastructure as justified by KSA 75-4319B6. In order to aid the discussion, the following individuals should be present. Members of the governing body, City Manager Brent Trout, Deputy City Manager Doug Gerber, Administrative and Financial Services Director Jessica Lamandola, Deputy Utilities Director Braxton Copley, and myself. No action is anticipated to be taken when the open meeting resumes in the governing body chambers.
All those in favor, vote yes. All those, yes.
We need to motion,
Yes,
right?
motion.
A motion.
I remembered the vote. Motion
I motioned, he seconded.
and second. All those in favor, vote yes. All those opposed, vote no. That doesn't get it right.
We have 8 yes. Mr. Padilla voting no.
Okay, at this time, we will proceed into executive session.
Yeah, so the room is clear.
When the room is clear.
Are you calling Cheryl? Are you calling Cheryl?
Although, the district is.
There's a need for another executive session this evening. Would the city attorney please read the notice?
Motion is to recess into executive session for a period of time not to exceed 10 minutes for consultation with the city's legal counsel to discuss attorney-client privilege matters as justified by KSA 75-4319B2. In order to aid the discussion, the following individuals should be present. Members of the governing body, City Manager Brent Trout, Deputy City Manager Doug Gerber, Administrative and Financial Services Director Jessica Lamandola, Police Chief Bill Cochran, Chief of Litigation Shelley Starr, and myself. No action will be taken when the open meeting resumes in the governing body chambers.
Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Do I have a motion and a second? All those in favor, raise your right hand. All those opposed, same sign. We are now in executive session. We have come out of executive session and we have the need to extend for 10 minutes. Do I have a motion? We have a motion and a second. All those in favor, raise your right hand. All those opposed, same sign. Approved. We will be back in 10 minutes. We've come out of executive session with no action taken, seeing nothing else before the council. This meeting is adjourned.
Thank you.